in Glasgow and watching around the world. This paper concerns a pilot study being undertaken at the Alexander Turnbull Library relating to music created on Digital Audio Workstation software. We have collaborated with New Zealand music artist Luke Roll to archive production components for two of his albums. The study addresses the reality that where music production once involved physical media such as magnetic tape, for the last 25 years, it's largely shifted to the digital domain. While preserving the final music released to the public remains relatively straightforward, documenting the processes that artists now employ in production is far more challenging. This paper will begin with some background about Roll's music, then consider Digital Audio Workstation or DAW software and the associated archival challenges. We'll then cover the approaches that we've taken here at the library and our progress to date. Born in 1983, Luke Roll is one of New Zealand's foremost synth-pop musicians. Over the last 22 years, he's released some 15 albums and performed around the world. His track Gravy Rainbow, released under the alias Disaster Radio, was a YouTube hit of 2010 with over 1 million views, while his albums as Eyeliner are considered essential works of the global vaporwave movement. Much of his music is available for free download and reuse under Creative Commons licenses. Music writer Martin Pepperell notes that Roll grew up in a family with interests that met at the intersection of art and technology. He adopted computer music technology at an early age, thus exemplifying recent generations of musicians whose practice is all digital. His early albums were composed using the freeware program Jazzscholar Buzz. Around 2010, when Buzz stopped being actively supported, Roll adopted the Steinberg DAW Nuendo as his main creative platform. Since the development of non-linear audio editing in the late 1980s, DAWs such as Pro Tools and Logic Pro have become essential to music production. GarageBand, which comes bundled with Apple devices, is a consumer-level example that many people will be familiar with. These applications replicate techniques first developed in recording studios, such as multi-track recording, tape editing, sound mixing, and signal processing. They also offer new tools around digital sampling, sequencing, and synthesis. DAWs are now utilized in most production contexts, from professional studios through to home recording. Why would it be desirable to preserve the information contained in a DAW production? Research libraries such as the Turnbull have traditionally sought to collect material which contributes to the study of music as a creative process. This might include manuscript scores and sketches, live recordings, studio tapes, items through which one can trace the evolution of musical works, including the construction of studio recordings. The project materials generated by DAWs are thus the digital equivalents of what archives have previously collected. And if these files are not preserved in some way, we inadvertently create an archival void for future understanding of how most contemporary music is being created. The complexity of Digital Audio Workstation applications, however, presents a number of daunting challenges for digital preservation, and the objective of our pilot study, which we refer to as the Disaster Radio Project, has been to develop sustainable ways of archiving the information contained in Roll's DAW productions. We aim to complete this study later this year and hope our findings might prove useful to music archivists, as well as artists wanting to secure long-term access to the digital componentry of their music.
A key challenge for the preservation of digital content is technical obsolescence. As Ricardo Ferrante writes, born digital objects require particular hardware and operating systems in order to be accessed and rendered with integrity. As technology evolves, parts of these technical environments are replaced with newer, faster, and smaller components. The hardware and software necessary for a 10-year-old object to operate as designed is often no longer readily available. Neither is the skill set required to maintain that environment. Innovation in the marketplace itself is a risk to the cultural heritage that it produces. Standard audio files, such as WAV or MP3, are currently deemed as having a low risk of obsolescence. However, DAW files are another story entirely. When audio is loaded into or generated by and then manipulated in a DAW, each decision is stored in a project file. This is an aggregate of editing, mixing, and effects metadata relating to audio assets and/or coded audio sequences. The production's integrity is thus dependent upon both project file and audio sources. Adding further complexity is the ubiquitous use of plugins, third-party software that extends a DAW's functionality with virtual instruments and audio effects. Signal paths, the flow of audio signals from source to output, may also be routed through external sound modules. Another challenge is that most DAWs are proprietary, each using its own project file format that cannot be opened by other applications. And many lack open source code that would lead to greater interoperability. These factors pose real challenges to ensuring that DAW sessions can still be accessed into the future. There are 4 basic digital preservation strategies the library considered in archiving DAW files. The first was maintaining the original technical environment. The second was replacing original software with a backwards compatible application. The third was emulation by creating a virtual version of a suitable environment. And the fourth was migration, or migrating the digital content into a new format that can be accessed. The first 2 of these were deemed impractical by the library, given the varied permutations of DAWs, plugins, operating systems, and hardware, which would need to be maintained or replaced. Since the establishment of the National Digital Heritage Archive in 2008, the library's digital preservation strategy has been based on migration. There are increasing numbers of tools available for virtualization of digital content, and we did consider emulation as a possibility. However, for the purposes of the pilot project, there seemed to be far less risk in expanding our current migration strategies to include DAWs, rather than attempting to build a new virtual environment for the collection. We should note that issues with obsolete DAW projects are recognized by the music industry. Artists have reported slowly but surely losing access to older DAW sessions, thus being unable to remix or rearrange their past work. Losing the ability to creatively revisit earlier work highlights another reason why DAW preservation strategies are needed. The music and video industries have developed several container formats to enable better operability across platforms, most notably the OMF, the Open Media Framework file, and the newer AAF, Advanced Authoring Format file. Although designed to enable projects to work across different platforms, AAF files could enable migration of projects from DAW to DAW to ensure future access. But from a digital preservation perspective, such complex formats pose challenges similar to those presented by native DAW project files. Nor does their use overcome issues arising from the incorporation of third-party plugins, each with its own operating system and hardware dependencies. And these are paramount to Raoul's music. Nonetheless, AAF files may be considered for future collections.
Our collaboration with Luke began in 2018 when he contacted the library and asked whether we were preserving DAW project files, an area we'd already flagged for future research. The library then proceeded to develop a proposal with Raoul to archive 2 albums as a pilot. The Disaster Radio album Visions, created on Jescola Buzz, and the Eyeliner album By Now, created on Steinberg Nuendo. Our first discovery was that the Visions Buzz project files could no longer be opened correctly a mere 13 years after being created, so another Nuendo-based album, Charisma, was substituted. The approach that we've developed to preserving Raoul's DAW projects is a special form of migration. For each of the tracks, Raoul has created a package of files to give to the library. If the Nuendo project file, the .npr file, represents the native digital object, then we have found a range of alternative ways for the information it contains to be expressed. Using the UK National Archives pronom registry as a guide, only low-risk formats are represented in the preservation packages that ROLL gives us. Certain components of these packages are relatively straightforward. Musicians will be familiar with exporting discrete individual tracks, for instance, vocals, bass, drums, as separate audio files or stems. These are readily preserved and can be imported into any DAW. Mixdowns, created from mixes of these individual tracks, are another standard output. More novel approaches have also been taken so that researchers have other ways of investigating ROLL's music. He has compiled spreadsheets that document the settings, plugins, and signal paths for individual stems, cross-referenced to other assets in the preservation packages. Screenshots have been taken to document settings for every plugin, for every stem, for every track. For by now, over 700 such images have been created. ROLL also created screencast videos in which he provides a guided tour of the track sessions, disclosing his creative and technical decisions. The approach taken for the Disaster Radio project is new for the library. Normally, our in-house archivists would manage migration work following receipt of the original files, converting that into stable formats for preservation and access. But for this project, migration was undertaken prior to transfer to the library and by the donor themselves. Our rationale was that ROLL was clearly the person who best understood his technical processes and could therefore accomplish migration most effectively. And in recognition of the work required of him, the library paid ROLL for time spent preparing the collection.
In 2021, Raoul and the library completed work on archiving By Now, which was primarily composed using musical instrument digital interface, or MIDI, sequences. While the library hasn't preserved the original Nuendo project files, we hope that by archiving the MIDI, stems, and mixes, along with other documentation, we have preserved the collection's significant properties and the underlying abstract form of the project files. The Luke Raoul collection was released in May 2021 and is available through the National Library of New Zealand's website. The collection is open access and available worldwide, and Raoul has generously made it available for online download under a Creative Commons by NC SA license, which means tracks can be remixed, resampled, mashed up, and rearranged. We see this collection as having interest for researchers in the music studies and education sectors, in the music community, and for the wider public. As a promotional bonus, we invited other artists to contribute to a remix album based on the collection. And this album, free By Now Remixes, was released on Bandcamp in 2021 as a free download, alongside a blog providing further examples of potential reuse.
Luke has since deposited materials relating to the Disaster Radio album Charisma, which includes a range of hybrid audio and MIDI compositions. This has presented a more complex archival problem than By Now, highlighting further challenges that may be faced using the method outlined in this paper, even within a single artist's oeuvre. Following completion of the pilot study later this year, we anticipate presenting a fuller analysis of the Disaster Radio project. Our interim conclusion, though, is that the approach holds much potential for digital preservation of DAW projects. And one of the main drivers of the project's success so far has been the close collaboration between the artist and the library. Thank you very much.
Thank you.